welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro, live in our nation's capital. Thanks for being with us tonight. I had answers from White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, and he's making news right here in a moment. Ann Coulter is also on deck tonight. But first, my opening statement. If you're a cop working in a sanctuary jurisdiction, then you're being directed by left-wing liberal progressive mayors and governors to protect illegal criminals who not only violated our laws in coming here, but in addition committed crimes while here. You're being told not to share information about illegal criminals and not honor federal ICE detainers. So, you've got a decision to make. And if this is a tough one for you and you can't figure out what your sworn obligation is, then get the hell out of law enforcement. Think back to the day you graduated from rookie school, when you got a badge and a gun. You earned the right to protect us. We trusted that you understood your mission. We were proud of you. Proud to count you in that blue wall that every day separates a civilized society from a chaotic and barbaric one. Your job? To protect the innocent, follow the truth, arrest the criminal, be true to your oath. That oath is not negotiable. It is not for sale, and neither are you. You knew this when you signed up. And no namby-pamby, bleeding heart, left-wing, socialist, political whore has the right to demand that you defy that oath. And if you don't have the courage to do what you know needs to be done, then you don't deserve to wear that badge. Take a look at what happens when you listen to these wimps, when you free the criminal wanted for deportation. All of these innocents were killed by illegals. On the right, innocent victims. The left, they're killers. Some accused, others already convicted. All of them illegals who were deported, then came back to the United States and went on to kill after they returned. There are thousands more like them. And every one of those politicians that ordered you not to cooperate with federal authorities has the blood of these innocent victims on their hands. And I hate to say this, but every one of you in law enforcement who bought into this liberal nonsense also has blood on your hands. You would never allow an American criminal to roam freely in your jurisdiction if another law enforcement agency asked you to hold them. Why change the rule and prioritize the illegal for whom there is a want? Why would you release them and not notify a fellow law enforcement agency? If you release the criminal, you guarantee a fellow officer or agent is going to be in harm's way when they go out to find that criminal. To be clear, we're not talking about, nor is anyone asking you to notify ICE about the illegal who's simply working in the field, the waitress, the babysitter, or someone cleaning a house. So what to do? You notify ICE as soon as you can, and I don't care what you have to do to get that done. If you have to do it quietly, anonymously, behind closed doors, underground, through a special hotline, email, or carrier pigeon, damn it, just do it. You instinctively understand danger. It's in your DNA. If you have an MS-13 gang member whose initiation you know requires that he beat someone to death or rape someone in front of his fellow gang members, and you don't tell ICE, you have blood on your hands. Americans have the right to know when they're in danger. Why would you treat an illegal criminal different than an American criminal? Hell, maybe law-abiding states should clear out their prisons and send their own criminals to sanctuary states. Since they're open to taking other countries' criminals, the least they can do is take ours. Can't can't you see that you're being used in a political tug of war? If this is a tough one for you, and you're going to start listening to the ACLU or some liberal mayor who doesn't give a damn about you, your contract, or your oath, directing that you release the wanted criminal alien out the side door, then maybe you should rethink this whole thing and go into social work. You're too damn dumb to be in law enforcement. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page or Twitter. # Judge Jeanine. Joining me now is conservative author Ann Coulter. All right, Ann, good evening. What do you think?
You know what I think.
Tell me.
I always want to kiss you after your opening statements. I've never looked at it from that end, and it's a very clever point you're making. I usually look at it from the other end, and President Trump is absolutely right. He ought to withdraw all federal funding from sanctuary cities, as we always find out whenever liberals win some victory at the federal level. Very rarely, like immigration law, laws passed by Congress and signed by the president, but usually some frivolous Supreme Court decision on, gay marriage, for example. That's when we're all reminded that federal law is supreme. How long ago did what was the Heller case in the Supreme Court, finding an individual right to own guns? Try to get a gun in Chicago. Try to get a gun in Los Angeles, Washington, or New York. Whereas the day after the gay marriage decision, some poor Kentucky clerk in Kentucky is being harassed to turn over a gay marriage license.
But Ann,
so it
here's the
always
thing.
works this way, and I think you're right. I would add that for any cops following Jeanine's excellent advice, don't do it in the Ninth Circuit, because this would be a great case. Do it in Austin, Texas.
But Ann, my point is that it's time for them to figure out a way to alert other law enforcement, because too many people are in jeopardy. American citizens are in jeopardy. Their fellow brothers and sisters in law enforcement are in jeopardy. But anyway, I want to move on. Look, the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It's a big thing now. The president has indicated, President Trump, he's not going. What do you think, and why do you think he said that?
I'm so relieved he's not going. I want him working and not, hanging around with the enemy. He could be in danger at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. But seriously, I mean, he has everyone against him. I want him in the White House working. This is a frivolous event.
But he's always working. And we both know the president. The guy works 23 hours a day. The man doesn't sleep. He's a force of nature.
Okay,
but here's the thing.
4 more hours he can spend shutting down sanctuary cities.
All right, so who does this hurt? Is it all the lobbyists who go to this thing? Is it the media? Who does it hurt, ultimately?
I think it is a good statement he's making, by the way. I don't know, it'll probably still be a fun party. It probably hurts the media a little bit, and I think it's appropriate, because he's right. And I think it is worth saying over and over again, he is not attacking the First Amendment. He is not attacking a free press or the media. He is attacking a lying media, and they do lie. So basically your interpretation is that he's saying, I don't respect you as a press, so I'm not going to this dinner, and I'm not going to celebrate you as the press. Right. Well, most of the main organizations throwing the White House Correspondents' Dinner are the propagators of some of the biggest and most blatant lies that they tell over and over again. And just to give one quick example so that I'm not just saying this, once again, we hear, just recently I was reading this nonsense about Trump making fun of a disabled reporter. That has been proved false over and over again. The Washington Post took down comments that included the video showing Trump doing the exact same imitation for Ted Cruz, for a general. Now that's consciousness of guilt when they're taking down those videos from the comment section, just saying, I think this is just the way he does a flustered person. He doesn't even know who this reporter is. And yet they will not give up on that lie. They will not give up on the lie that he talked about how he sexually assaults women in that outrageous Access Hollywood tape, and it was outrageous. I mean, everyone who's ever been on a mic knows that it is unfair to be using what we say on hot mics. This thing dug up from 7 years later in a way to sabotage a presidential candidate. He was not saying that. He was describing something that probably everybody knows. Rich girls like to hang out with celebrities and rich guys. He said they let you do it.
30 seconds.
That's not an assault
30 days,
if they let you do it.
Okay, and 30 seconds. The president has issued a lot of executive orders the first 100 days. What else do you think is important for the next, 60 days, 70 days?
Well, he's got to get his nominees confirmed, and it would be nice if he had a little help from Capitol Hill rather than having all the congressional Republicans and the entire bureaucracy.
Supreme Court, does he go nuclear, Ann?
I don't think he's going to need to. I don't think Gorsuch is that frightening. He's great. He's probably one of the best of the list.
Okay, so you don't think so?
But he's no Scalia.
Well,
and
all
come
right.
on.
All right, doesn't scare you. All right, Ann Coulter, we're out of time. Thanks for being with us. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you.
All right. Earlier, I headed to the White House to meet with Press Secretary Sean Spicer. We discussed reports that certain media outlets were barred from a press gaggle yesterday. But first, I asked the press secretary about another report that said that the White House chief of staff had reached out to the FBI and asked them publicly to downplay allegations that the Trump campaign had been in frequent contact with Russian agents. I asked Spicer to set the record straight. Take a look. Let's talk about what happened with Reince Priebus and the FBI. Who initiated the phone call between Reince and the FBI?
So what happened is there was a meeting here at the White House a couple weeks ago to discuss an intelligence matter. At the end of the intelligence matter, the deputy director of the FBI approached Reince. He'd never met him before prior to the meeting. Said, "May I talk to you privately?" Explained to Reince that the story that had just come out in the New York Times talking about frequent contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian officials was not accurate, was grossly overstated, and he wanted him to know that. To which Reince replied, "Great, let's set the record straight." The deputy director at the time said, "I'll get back to you," and then called him back a few hours later and said that they didn't want to get in the process or the habit of refuting various stories that would set a bad precedent. Reince said, "Well, this is kind of weird. You've now presented me with information, and we'd like to clear our name because there were some serious and substantial charges made by the New York Times." So then they said, after a conversation with then Director Comey, that we could say with confidence that we had been briefed, and in fact that the Times story was inaccurate and grossly overstated.
Okay. Was Reince Priebus within the bounds of his job in asking the FBI to push back on what he believed was an inaccurate story?
Well, again, remember, he didn't ask them to push back in the sense that they came to us and said the story in the New York Times is false and grossly misstated. We said, "Great, could you set the record straight?" It is ironic to me that the media, who we were trying to help get the information and get the story straight, after being falsely maligned with blind sources by the New York Times, we tried to set the record straight, and now the rest of the mainstream media is attacking us for trying to actually help get the story straight.
And then with the gaggle that happened after all of this, there is a claim that the New York Times was exempted almost in retaliation.
So what the New York Times doesn't want to tell you, the pool, which is a representation of all the different kind of outlets, there's print, online, radio, television, it rotates every day. They were not part of the pool. That's what they don't want to tell you. So the fact of the matter is that the Associated Press, the Wires, and a couple of the other papers were part of the pool. They came and we expanded the pool to allow some additional outlets to come into the gaggle. And I think any assertion that they were banned or whatever is completely ridiculous.
So what you're saying is the gaggle was just an expansion of the pool.
That's right.
And not an elimination of the press.
There is a pool that is set up by the White House Correspondents Association that is representation, TV, radio, and it rotates daily who's in that pool. They tell us who's in the pool. We don't tell them. And at the end, what we did is we chose to have a gaggle and invite some additional members of the media to come and be part of it, which we have every right to do.
So John Boehner this week says he doesn't believe Obamacare is going to be repealed or replaced. First of all, is he wrong? And why is he even getting involved?
Well, everyone's got a right to their opinion. But I think the president's been very clear that he is going to repeal and replace Obamacare and replace it with something that's more affordable and gives the American people more access. When you look at a state like Arizona where premium's gone up 112%, and you look at the amount of choice or lack thereof that people have, you realize that Obamacare is collapsing on its own.
Yeah, but the problem is that the Pew poll is showing that now the numbers in support of Obamacare are going up 54%.
Right, I think that it's incumbent upon us to continue to remind the American people what's going on. They were promised an Affordable Care Act, and nothing close to that is what they got. And this is something the president was very clear on during the campaign. Their premiums are going up. The amount of choice that they have has gone down. And we've got to make sure that we fulfill the president's vision, agenda, and promise to the American people to give them the health care options and prices that they were promised.
Okay, let's talk about immigration. Now, the numbers seem to indicate that President Obama deported a significant number of illegal immigrants, and President Trump is doing the same thing to keep Americans safe. Why is President Trump getting all the pushback?
Well, I don't think, I think President Obama didn't get the pushback from the American people. Number one, he also used a different set of accounting. They got credit for people at the border that they turned away. This president is actually addressing the real problem that America faces. But again, it's another promise and pledge that he made to the American people on the campaign trail, specifically that people who pose a threat to our public safety and our way of life or have a criminal record would be first and foremost the ones on his list to be deported. He's 100% following through there. During the Obama administration, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement had their hands tied. The Obama administration had one carve-out after another, one exemption after another for people that they couldn't go after. This president recognized, in the interest of not only our national security, but our economic security, that we were going to untie the hands of our ICE and Custom and Border Patrol officers who there every day trying to control the border and enforce the mission that they sought to do. And he's letting them do their job.
Well, is it a fact that President Obama did in fact deport more illegal immigrants than any president before him?
I think the way they counted it,
How
sure.
do you count it?
But again, no, because before President Obama, you actually counted people that were in this country and that were removed from this country because they weren't here legally. What happened under the Obama administration is they changed the way in which they counted deportation, meaning if you approached the border and you were turned away, that was counted as a deportation.
Well, wasn't that a catch and release?
So it was basically, you didn't even have to come over the border to be counted as being deported. If you tried to enter the country.
So they played with the numbers.
They did. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so what time do you get up?
Right just before 6.
Yeah. And what time do you see the president most days?
Somewhere between 9 and 10.
Is he still in his pajamas? Does he sleep in the Oval Office?
I've never seen him. He is working nonstop.
I know he is. That's why I'm asking you.
He is trying to keep up with him is an impossible task. His commitment to making this country better, protecting it, growing jobs is unwavering. And I think he makes all of us really become inspired to do our best to fulfill his agenda.
And when you relax, what do you do?
I haven't relaxed yet, so I'll tell you when that happens.
Sean Spicer, thanks for allowing us to be part of your busy day.
Thanks, Judge.
And John Bolton on deck tonight to discuss the coming executive order on immigration and talk about high praise. Even the president loves my next guest.
First of all, I want to thank Matt Schlapp and his very incredible wife and boss, Mercedes.
CPAC Chair Matt Schlapp standing by to talk about his organization's huge week, and we'll recap the highlights. And speaking of CPAC,
first of all, I want to thank Matt Schlapp and his very incredible wife and boss, Mercedes, who have been fantastic friends and supporters, and so great when I watch them on television defending me. Nobody has a chance.
A presidential shout out from the CPAC stage. Matt Schlapp is the chair of the American Conservative Union. He's fresh off his organization's Conservative Political Action Conference. Now, the president may have been the highlight, but what a few days it was. Matt, thanks for being here.
Good to be here, Judge.
I was thrilled to be there and to speak at CPAC, and I know you had some of the biggest conservatives out there speaking, and how would you rate your own conference?
Oh, my Lord. I think I have to resign. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to replicate this again. I mean,
hey, we had the president at CPAC.
It was unbelievable. Look, the last time a president went in his first year to CPAC, it was Ronald Reagan in 1981. This does not happen very often. And it's quite a statement to conservatives. He's saying, look, I know I wouldn't have gotten here without you, and we got to work together to get this agenda passed. And our poll came out from today. Boy, they are with him, and they are with this agenda. I don't believe any of this ridiculous press coverage that there's some kind of division.
Well, and you know what's interesting is, for people who don't know the president, I mean, he is a man who is loyal.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't forget you. This doesn't surprise me at all. And, I was delighted that he mentioned Mercedes. And for all of our viewers out there, Mercedes Schlapp, indeed, the beautiful woman that you see on Fox all the time is indeed the wife of my guest. All right, let's talk about the White House Correspondents' Dinner. President says, I ain't going. Who does this hurt? And why would he say that?
CPAC 1, Correspondents' Dinner 0. I think it's awesome because Republican presidents hate going to this dinner.
Why?
It's another time when they got to put on a tuxedo and get mocked. Basically, the Republican president gets mocked by everybody in the press corps. And I think it's annoying. And why should he do it if he doesn't want to do it? Look, he's at war with the press. That's what's going on here. You might not think that's a good strategy, or others might not think it's a good strategy, but it's a fact. And he doesn't want to go be phony and go put on a tuxedo and act all chummy with him.
Okay, but who does this hurt?
I don't think this hurts him. I don't think not going to one more dinner in D.C.
No, but does it hurt? I mean, does it hurt the press? Does it, are lobbyists there?
No,
I mean, who's in this room? Because I've been there. This is loaded.
When you go to this thing, the only way you get a table at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, if you're big media, they're the ones buying these tables. Okay,
so, all of us, the print media, television, radio.
That's right.
All right, and so the president says no. It's not because he doesn't want to put a tuxedo on.
No.
But Obama loved it.
Loved it because guess what happened when Obama went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner? They all get to mock Republicans. So, it's just that when the press comes together inside D.C., this is one of these annual traditions where Republicans just got to take it. And I think he's just decided he's not just going to take it. But more than that, this is symbolic. He is trying to reorient the whole way in which the press assumes they get to work with the president. Right. He's messing with him, Judge.
He is. It all started with Twitter. Well, what about President Bush? Did he like it? He went.
He did not like it. First of all, he never liked putting on a tuxedo. Would any president like going and spending 3 hours with the people who they don't respect and who torture them on a daily basis? By the time George W. Bush left office, he was about 30% in approval ratings, and he couldn't buy a good story. And these people went after him and charged him with everything you could imagine. And it's time for all that to stop.
And so even though President Bush might not have liked it, he still succumbed and he still went. And so you've got Donald Trump saying, I ain't playing this game.
He's not playing. Look, this is the whole thing about having a guy who's of a certain age and of a certain stature, where he just says, screw you.
Okay, and so what is the press thinking right now?
They don't know what to think. They think they're looking for every slight as something bigger than it is. So Sean Spicer can make very small little decisions that press secretaries always make, as you broke on this show, and they think it's something bigger.
Well, yeah, they think they're being cut out, and he said, well, wait a minute, we actually added to the pool.
No, Judge, they think the First Amendment is on trial. They think there's something in the First Amendment that says they can go into Sean Spicer's office. That is absurd.
All right, Matt Schlapp, always good to have you on Justice. Thanks so much. John Bolton on the new executive order on immigration. And next, a new leader for the Democratic Party. But is he the right man at a rough time? We'll get into that and more with tonight's panel. David Avella and Chris Hahn, ready to jump in the fray with me next. Welcome back to Justice. Time for the panel. I'm joined live by David Avella, GOPAC chairman and radio talk show host, and former Senator Schumer advisor Chris Hahn. Thanks for being here, guys. All right, first thing. Let's talk about, very quickly, the White House Correspondents' Dinner. President breaking with tradition, saying, I ain't going, and that pretty much puts the end to the dinner, doesn't it, Chris?
No, I think it's still going to be a good dinner. They'll get Alec Baldwin to play Trump. Nobody will even miss him. I think the president is missing...
You're very creative, Chris.
I think the president's missing a great opportunity to look human and appeal to people who may not necessarily like him. This is a place where presidents get to be a little self-effacing, get to pick on the press a little bit, have a little bit of fun. You and I have covered it together many times, Judge. I think it's a great event, and I think the president's going to regret missing it.
But you know what? I don't think he's going to regret it at all. I mean, he's got his own media. He does Twitter. But what do you think, David?
The president doesn't need this dinner to poke at the media and to have fun with the media. He has been doing it since he started running this campaign. And look, here's the reality. This White House Correspondents' Dinner has become New York Post page 6, not page 1 news. This is a gossip column event.
Interesting.
And whether we have it or not, America doesn't change.
Yeah, good point. Chris says it's page 1 today. One for you, Chris. All right, I want to keep going. Now, Tom Perez, all right, now the new head of the DNC.
Yep.
I assume you like him, Chris.
I love him. Look, he's a New Yorker. He spent a lot of time in Buffalo. Buffalo is a lot more like Ohio than it is New York City. I think he's a good guy. I think the Democratic Party's got some structural issues it's got to deal with. They've got to learn how to appeal in the state, at the state and local level, something that they've ignored for the last 20 years. And I think if Tom Perez could make that change, he could be very successful.
So you're glad it wasn't Ellison?
You know, look, I would have been happy with either one. But I think that Tom Perez is the right choice.
Big difference between Perez and Ellison. You know it, Chris.
Oh, yeah, there's a huge difference between Perez and Ellison. I think Perez is obviously more structured. Perez has worked in places like Western New York, like I said, which is much more like
Western New York,
the Midwest.
I think that's where Hillary Clinton said upstate New York she's bringing 200,000 jobs, but I digress. And then we netted the negative 7,000. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead, David.
I know very little about Tom Perez other than he came out of the Obama administration, and very little good has come out of the Obama administration. And his big problem is going to be he was the favorite of the D.C. establishment, and how he gets Bernie Sanders supporters in the fold for the Democratic Party. That's his challenge, and as a Republican, I look forward to seeing if he can do it.
All right, guys, I want to move along then. I'm fascinated by these town hall meetings and all of these candidates going back home, Congress people going back home and getting hell dumped on them. What do you think, Chris? Whether they're Democrats or Republicans, should they call a hold on these meetings, or what do they do?
You know, I'm a guy who's a progressive who comes on this show and other conservative shows. So I take all comers. And I think if you want to be in public life, you've got to appear in public. And you got to go out there. And if you know they're angry, you got to say, look, I'm here all night. As long as everybody's civil, I'll answer any question you want. And if you're afraid to do that, you should get out of politics no matter what party you're in.
What do you think, David?
Exactly right. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, and I would say Democrats who are up in 18 also aren't holding town hall elections. Joe Manchin hasn't had one. Claire McCaskill hasn't had one. So Republican and Democrats. And for fellow Republicans, look, what better way to go out and sell our message than to do town hall meetings? And if you can't take tough questions from constituents, how are you going to deal with what's going on in here in Washington? And how are you going to convince other members of Congress to come to your position? We ought to be holding these town hall meetings.
But Chris, the fact that, as David says, Manchin and McCaskill are not doing these town hall meetings and they're up in 18, that tells me that that they're more aligned with Republicans, what does it tell you?
You know, I fully expect both of them to do town hall meetings. I think right now they don't want to step on the story, which is Republicans getting attacked at these town hall meetings. I think after a while you'll see them do it.
So they want to step on the story, so they're being tough, huh? I think they're being wimps if they can't show up.
Hey, look, I say this firmly. I think Democrats and Republicans should be doing these meetings all the time. They should be meeting with their constituents. They should be answering tough questions to anybody who wants to ask it.
Well, I agree, and when I ran for office 5 times, I agree. I mean, they could threaten to hang you in the village square, you still show up.
That's right.
But what do you think about if people are not from the jurisdiction, or from that, congressional district? I mean, is there something that is unfair? Let's just talk philosophically about them showing up and, creating all this hoopla for the candidates.
It's a free country. People are allowed to go to meetings. Let me add to this. There has never been a higher interest in American politics and in current events than what we have now.
Is it an interest, Chris, that David is talking about, or is it an agenda? Is it an agenda that they're so PO'd that Donald Trump won? Go ahead.
Well,
Judge, you sound like me. You sound like me 8 years ago. This is exactly what I was saying to you on this show 8 years ago.
All right, explain.
Look, this is what's happened. This is what the Tea Party started as, and I was like, it's an agenda, it's AstroTurf. I was wrong, and anybody who's saying that about this movement now.
So I'm wrong. David, hit it.
Look, Trump supporters are equally fired up, and maybe they're not talked about as much, but look, they see the path to higher wages, more jobs, and keeping America safe, and they're not going to return to the policies of the last 8 years. And while the focus may be on those who are coming to disrupt town hall meetings, the Trump people are out too.
All right, David Avella, Chris Hahn. That's it, Chris. Thanks for being with us tonight. We'll see you next time. A new executive order on immigration expected any day now. So what could it look like? With me now is former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton. All right, good evening, Ambassador.
Glad to be with you.
Good to have you here. What do you think will be different about this one?
Well, I think obviously they're going to try and tailor it to eliminate some of the objections that were raised in all the pieces of litigation filed around the country. They're going to make it clear it doesn't
And the
apply.
objections having to do with if you're a visa holder, if you're a
green card holder, anything like that. And they've got some protections built in for notice and so on and so forth. But the fundamental issue and the fundamental thing wrong with the Ninth Circuit's decision was the judicial assertion that they could determine the national security of the United States and when it was threatened rather than the President of the United States. And that's an issue that doesn't belong in the courts. I'm sure they're going to try it again. We may have to go to the Supreme Court on it. But I think Trump is absolutely right. When you have people in black robes saying, well, I don't think that's such a national security threat to the United States, we're in deep trouble.
Well, you know, so many people, Ambassador, were arguing, well, we have checks and balances and three equal branches of government. But, according to the Constitution, there are certain parts of it, certain things that are exclusively, within the realm of the president's authority.
Right, and reinforced in this case by statutes that give him expressly the authority that he was trying to exercise. And so when the court, you could hear it in the oral argument in the Ninth Circuit, something everybody should listen to, whether you're a lawyer or not, where you have this judge.
They're sending them pallets of millions of dollars on unmarked planes. But I digress on that one. But the executive order, when it does come out, and hopefully, whether or not it's going to be litigated again, is there still a question as to whether or not there's going to be a litigation on the first executive order? Is there continuing litigation on that?
Well, I think it's still continuing. I would argue that a new executive order moots the prior litigation. I'm sure they'll get a leave to amend the complaint. They'll be right back in court, but at least you start with a fresh piece of paper, and I think that's important. But we've already seen from the Department of Homeland Security an effort to undercut this new executive order before it's come out by a leaked report, the substance of which I don't think we've seen, which says, well, the 7 countries that get particular scrutiny are not really much of a terrorist threat.
Well, let's talk about the leaks then. I mean, what we've got within the bureaucracy, and Donald Trump, and the president, I should say, has been talking about all these leaks. But the bureaucracy in itself, is it bigger almost than the executive office itself?
Yeah, well, look, the bureaucracy is often called the fourth branch of government. And if you ask, unfortunately, sadly, many career people, they'll tell you they think they are. In reality, the authority of the executive branch comes from the president's constitutional authority and statutory mandates from Congress. The bureaucracy has no independent legitimacy on its own, but there are a lot of people in there, particularly in departments that have a real culture of trying to run policy on their own rather than follow the president's policy, that they can make it up, and these politicians come and go, but they're there forever.
And the shame of it is that the bureaucracy is not a meritocracy, that they get to stay there, and it's almost as though the middle management is making the calls, and they contribute to this culture of what is acceptable and not acceptable.
Well, it is a cultural thing. I mean, a lot of people talk about the danger of Obama administration holdovers, people who have burrowed into the bureaucracy. That is a real danger. But the bigger problem is the culture. I saw it at the State Department. They really want to be a European foreign ministry, which every couple of years a foreign minister and one political appointee comes in and the bureaucracy goes on. That's not the way we do it, fortunately.
All right. Ambassador Bolton, thank you so much for being with us
Welcome to
this
Washington.
evening. Well, I love Washington. Don't forget to friend me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Judge_Jeanine. And congratulations to Lisa Everest for being my 2 millionth Facebook follower liker. Lisa won a signed copy of my book, He Killed Them All, Robert Durst and My Quest for Justice. Thanks so much for watching. The Greg Gutfeld Show is next. See you next week. Goodbye from the Capitol.